Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive all about the red planet Mars.
Mars, it's a fascinating place.
Oh yeah, it really is, and we've got a whole stack of articles here from Earth and Space, Global Times, SpaceX's website, even Wikipedia.
A lot of info.
Yeah, lots to dig into, and I know you, our listeners, you love space exploration.
Absolutely. Such a hot topic these days.
It is, and so today we're going to be focusing on the feasibility and the timeline of humans actually colonizing Mars.
Like living there.
Like living there, yeah. Could it really happen within our lifetimes?
I mean, it's a question a lot of people are asking.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the big names, of course, in this whole Mars colonization thing is Elon Musk and his company SpaceX.
Right. Huge ambitions.
Huge ambitions. They want to make humanity a multi-planetary species.
Multiplanetary species. Bold.
Bold, right. And their target is Mars by 2050.
2050, that's not that far away.
Not that far away. No, they aim to have a million people living on Mars by then.
That's a lot of people.
A million people, it's like a whole city. I can't even imagine. Well, and think about why Mars, though. Like, why there?
Yeah, good question. Why not the moon or somewhere else?
It's strategic. You know, Mars is relatively close to Earth,
Yeah.
at least compared to other planets.
Okay, so closer than, say, Jupiter.
Exactly. And it gets decent sunlight, not as much as Earth, obviously.
Right, right.
But enough. And here's the interesting part. It has an atmosphere.
Oh, right. I forgot about that. Most planets don't.
Yeah, it's carbon dioxide rich.
CO2, isn't that what we breathe out?
Yeah, exactly. So not breathable for us directly, but that CO2 could potentially be used for something else super important, growing plants.
Oh, wow. So we could, like, farm on Mars?
Potentially, yeah. And plus the day length on Mars is really similar to Earth's.
Oh, so we'd still have that, like, normal day-night cycle.
More or less, yeah. Which could be good for our, like, circadian rhythms and all that.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not Earth, but it's something, right?
It's a starting point.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe Mars isn't a total wasteland, but how do we even get there?
Well, that is the question, isn't it? And SpaceX thinks they have the answer?
Which is?
Starship, they call it a fully reusable transportation system.
Starship. It's that giant, like, silver rocket thing, right?
That's the one. You've probably seen pictures. It's designed to carry crew and cargo to Mars and beyond.
It's like something out of a movie. It looks so futuristic.
It does, but the crazy thing is it's real. They're actually building and testing it.
I know. It's mind-blowing to think that it could actually take people to Mars one day.
And it's not just about getting there. It's about making the whole mission feasible, cost-effective, efficient.
Right, because space travel is expensive, to say the least.
Oh, yeah, incredibly expensive. And that's where Starship's design comes in. It's built with reusability in mind.
Reusable. Okay, so, like, you can use it more than once.
Exactly, like an airplane. Instead of just throwing away the rocket after each launch, they can bring it back and use it again.
Oh, wow, so that saves a ton of money.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
It drastically reduces the cost of space travel.
Makes sense. The lighter the load, the less fuel you need.
Right, exactly. And that's crucial when you're talking about a journey as long as going to Mars.
And speaking of the journey, what happens when they actually get there? Like, there's no gas station on Mars to refuel for the trip back, right?
You're thinking ahead. That's a great point, and you're absolutely right. No gas stations on Mars.
No Martian convenience stores. Bummer.
Maybe someday, but yeah, for now, that's where SpaceX has another trick up their sleeve.
Oh, they've got more. They've thought of this.
They've thought of everything, or at least they're trying to.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. Tell me.
They're planning to use Mars's own natural resources to create fuel on the planet's surface.
No way. Wait, what? How is that even possible?
Pretty ingenious, right? They're going to be using the water ice and CO2 that's already on Mars to make rocket fuel.
Water ice, like frozen water.
Yep, and CO2 from the atmosphere.
And they can turn that into fuel for spaceships.
It's chemistry, some pretty complex chemistry. The process is called in situ resource utilization.
In situ resource utilization, that's a mouthful.
It's a fancy way of saying living off the land, but on another planet.
Living off the land on Mars, that's wild.
Right. So they basically use electrolysis to split water into hydrogen and oxygen.
Electrolysis, like with batteries and stuff?
Similar concept, yeah. And then they combine the hydrogen with carbon from the CO2 to make methane.
Methane, like natural gas.
Exactly. And methane can be used as rocket fuel.
Wow. Okay, and the oxygen, well, we need that to breathe.
Bingo. And for other stuff too, like running life support systems.
It's like they're creating a whole mini ecosystem on Mars.
In a way, yeah, using what's already there to sustain a human presence.
It's mind-blowing, all this planning, all this innovation, but are they actually close to making this happen?
They're moving fast, I'll give them that. SpaceX is aiming to launch 5 uncrewed starships to Mars as early as 2026.
Wait, 2026? That's like next year.
I know, right? It seems crazy to think that we could see humans on Mars within the next few years.
I know, it's hard to wrap my head around it. Sending humans to Mars is one thing, but creating a permanent colony with 1 million people.
It's a huge leap, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. The journey alone is like, what, 80 to 150 days each way?
Yeah, it's not a quick trip.
I get antsy after a 2-hour flight. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I don't think I'd pack enough books.
Seriously, and it's not just about the time. There's the psychological and physiological toll, right?
Oh, absolutely. Long-duration space travel is tough on the human body and mind.
Yeah, like being weightless for that long, the radiation exposure, being cooped up in a tiny spaceship.
Yeah, all those things take a toll. Astronauts have to be incredibly resilient and adaptable.
It makes you wonder, who would even sign up for that?
Right. Who would volunteer for a one-way trip to Mars knowing they might never come back?
It's a huge commitment, a life-altering decision.
For sure, it's not for everyone.
No, definitely not. So it's not just about building rockets and spaceships. It's about understanding the human element, too, the mental and emotional aspects.
Yeah, you've got to consider the whole package, the technology, the human factor, everything.
So it's not just SpaceX in this race to Mars, right? There are other players, too.
Oh, yeah, definitely. China's space program is making some impressive strides as well.
China, really? They're getting into the Mars game, too.
They are, in fact, Xiaolong, a top planetary geoscientist in China.
Okay, planetary geoscientist, so he studies planets.
Yep, he predicts that the first human landing on Mars will happen around 2050.
So the same time frame as SpaceX. Interesting.
It is. It seems like the 2050s could be a pivotal decade for space exploration.
2 major players both aiming for Mars around the same time.
It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, for sure. But he also talks about some of the challenges that still need to be overcome.
Right, like developing even more powerful rockets to carry all the necessary equipment and supplies to Mars.
So bigger and better than Starship.
Yeah, even more powerful, able to lift even heavier loads.
Wow, okay, what else?
And of course, figuring out how to bring people back safely from Mars.
Oh, right, because SpaceX is talking about one-way trips initially.
Yeah, but other nations, like China, are aiming for round-trip missions.
Makes sense. A return trip adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it?
For sure, it's not just about getting there, it's about getting back too.
It's like planning a road trip. You've got to figure out the route both ways.
Yeah, exactly. And in this case, the road is millions of miles long and through space.
So what are some of the specific challenges of a return trip, according to this Zhao Long guy?
Well, one of the biggest ones is developing a spacecraft that can withstand re-entry into Earth's atmosphere.
Re-entry, right. 'Cause coming back through the atmosphere creates a lot of heat, friction.
Yeah, tons of heat. And Mars's atmosphere is much thinner than Earth's, so the spacecraft needs a super strong heat shield.
Okay, yeah, to survive that fiery descent back to Earth.
Exactly. It's a huge engineering challenge.
Wow, it's amazing to think about all the little details that have to be figured out for all of this to work.
Yeah, from the rockets to the spacesuits to the heat shields, it's a testament to human ingenuity.
Absolutely. So Xiaolong, he also talks about the psychological stuff, right? The impact of space travel on the human mind.
Oh, yeah. He actually shared a pretty interesting story about how his team started having dreams about oceans and forests on Mars while they were studying data from the Zhurong rover.
Zhurong rover, that's the Chinese one, right?
Yeah, their rover that's currently exploring Mars. And it's fascinating, right? Because it shows how even scientists who are supposed to be objective.
Yeah, like all about the data.
Exactly. Even they can be influenced by their hopes and desires, by that human need to find life, to find something familiar in a completely alien environment.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, wouldn't you be thrilled if you were the first person to discover life on another planet?
It would be incredible, absolutely.
So speaking of the Zhurong rover, what did it actually find on Mars?
Well, one of its most significant discoveries was evidence of marine sedimentary rocks.
Marine sedimentary rocks. Okay, I'm not a geologist. What does that even mean?
No worries. Basically, these are rocks that form from sediment deposited in water, usually in oceans or lakes.
So finding those on Mars means what? Like there used to be water there?
Exactly. It suggests that Mars might have had liquid water on its surface at some point in its history.
Wow, and water is like the key ingredient for life, right?
Pretty much, yeah. So it opens up the possibility that Mars may have once been habitable, even harboring some form of life.
That's incredible, like a whole other world with its own history.
Right, and the more we learn about Mars, the more intriguing it becomes.
Yeah, for sure. So we've talked about the technology, the challenges, the human element, but what about the bigger picture? Like, why are we so obsessed with going to Mars anyway?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Why Mars? There are a lot of reasons, some more practical, some more philosophical.
Okay, so like what are the practical reasons?
Well, for one, it's about expanding humanity's reach, ensuring the survival of our species in case something catastrophic happens to Earth.
Oh, so like if an asteroid hits Earth or something, we'd have a backup plan on Mars.
Exactly, a plan B for humanity. And I know it sounds a bit like a doomsday scenario.
Yeah, a little bit.
But considering all the challenges we face here on Earth,
Mm.
climate change, resource depletion, all that stuff, it's not entirely unreasonable to think about alternatives.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can see that. It's like an insurance policy for humanity.
In a way, yeah. But there are also other reasons, like the potential for scientific and technological advancement.
Oh, right. Like exploring Mars could lead to new discoveries, new technologies.
Absolutely, things that could benefit us both on Mars and back here on Earth.
It's like a ripple effect, right? Pushing the boundaries of knowledge and innovation.
Exactly. So there's the potential for practical benefits for scientific breakthroughs, but there are also ethical considerations, arguments against Mars colonization.
Oh, right. Like what kind of arguments?
Well, some people argue that it's ethically questionable to pour resources into colonizing another planet when we have so many problems here on Earth.
Like, shouldn't we focus on fixing our own planet first before venturing out to others?
That's their argument. Yeah, they say it's about priorities,
Mm.
about focusing on solving issues like poverty, hunger, disease here at home.
Makes sense. It's a valid point. It's a lot of money and resources being put towards Mars colonization.
Exactly. So there's that ethical dilemma, and then there's also the practical reality of the Martian environment.
Right. We talked about the challenges, the radiation, the lack of breathable air.
Yeah, Mars is harsh. It's a tough place to live, even with advanced technology.
So some people argue that the risks and costs outweigh the potential benefits.
That's their view. Yeah, they think we should focus our efforts on making Earth more sustainable rather than trying to escape to another planet.
Interesting. So there's a lot to consider, both for and against Mars colonization.
There is. It's a multifaceted issue. And then there's the whole question of colonialism and ecological damage. Are we just going to repeat the mistakes of our past on another planet?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Like, are we going to exploit Mars's resources, potentially harm any life that might be there?
It's a valid concern, and it raises questions about our responsibility as a species, as we venture out into the cosmos.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility. And what about the legal side of things? Like, who gets to make the rules on Mars?
The question of governance. That's a tricky one. SpaceX believes in self-determination for Martian colonists.
Self-determination, so like they govern themselves.
Yeah, they make their own laws, independent of Earth.
Wow, that's a bold idea, but wouldn't that lead to chaos?
It's a possibility, right?
Yep.
Without a clear legal framework, there's potential for conflict, for exploitation.
Yeah, and what about the influence of companies like SpaceX themselves? Like, if they're funding the colonization, won't they try to control things?
It's a concern, for sure. The history of colonialism on Earth is a reminder of how power imbalances can lead to problems.
Right, so we need to be careful not to repeat those same mistakes on Mars.
Absolutely. We need to think about how to create a just and equitable society on Mars, one that benefits everyone, not just a select few.
It's a big challenge figuring out how to govern a whole new planet.
It is. It'll require international cooperation, careful planning, a lot of thought.
So it sounds like we've got a lot of groundwork to lay before we start packing our bags for Mars.
We do. But that's what makes this so exciting, right? It's a challenge, but it's also an incredible opportunity.
To push the boundaries of human ingenuity, to explore new worlds.
Exactly. And to learn more about ourselves in the process.
Welcome back to our deep dive on Mars colonization.
Glad to be back.
So we've talked about all the big picture stuff, the why, the how of getting to Mars, but now I kind of want to zoom in on the human experience.
Yeah, the nitty-gritty of actually living there.
Exactly, because it's one thing to dream about setting foot on Mars, but it's a whole other thing to actually survive there.
Survive, yeah, that's a good word for it. Mars is not exactly welcoming.
No, not at all. I mean, the average temperature is like neck and neck 62 degrees Celsius.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty chilly.
That's colder than like anywhere on Earth.
Pretty much. And then there's the thin atmosphere, hardly any protection from radiation.
Right, and no breathable air, so we'd have to like live in pressurized habitats all the time.
Pretty much, yeah, no strolling around outside without a spacesuit.
It's kind of like living in a bubble.
In a way, yeah, a very high-tech, life-supporting bubble.
But even then, it's got to be tough, mentally. I mean, leaving Earth behind, potentially forever.
Oh yeah, the psychological impact is huge.
Imagine saying goodbye to your family, your friends, knowing you might never see them again.
And the isolation, being millions of miles away from everything familiar.
Yeah, it's got to be a lot to handle.
It takes a special kind of person, someone who's resilient, adaptable, able to handle stress and isolation.
So astronauts would need a whole lot more than just technical skills.
Absolutely. Emotional intelligence, problem-solving abilities, those are crucial too.
Because they're not just exploring, they're building a whole new society.
Pioneers, in the truest sense of the word.
And think about all the things they'd have to do: grow their own food, generate their own energy, deal with medical emergencies.
It's like a crash course in self-sufficiency on a planetary scale.
Yeah, I mean, we take all that stuff for granted here on Earth.
We do. We turn on a faucet and clean water comes out. We flip a switch and the lights go on.
But on Mars, every single system would have to be built from scratch.
Exactly. It's a monumental task.
So how do we even begin to prepare humans for that? Like, can you even train for something like that?
Well, it's not easy, but space agencies are doing their best.
What are they doing? Like simulations and stuff?
Yeah, NASA, for example, they conduct what they call analog missions.
Analog missions, what are those?
Basically, they send astronauts to places on Earth that are similar to Mars in some ways.
Okay, so like where?
Places like Antarctica, the deserts of Utah, those kinds of extreme environments.
Oh, wow. So they're like practicing for Mars here on Earth.
Exactly. They're testing technologies, studying human behavior, seeing how people handle the isolation, the confined living spaces.
It's like those survival shows, but for space.
Kinda, yeah. Except the stakes are much higher.
Yeah, because any mistake on Mars could be fatal.
Exactly. So they're trying to learn as much as they can here on Earth to minimize the risks.
Makes sense. So they're looking at the psychological stuff, the isolation, but what about the physical challenges?
Oh yeah, those are huge too.
Like I've heard that being in space for a long time can mess with your body.
It can, yeah. Microgravity, the lack of gravity can cause bone and muscle loss.
Oh, wow. So you'd get like weaker.
Yeah, muscles atrophy, bones become less dense. It's a problem.
And then there's the radiation, right? We talked about that earlier.
Yeah. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field like Earth, so astronauts would be exposed to more radiation.
So what can they do about that? Like, can you even protect yourself from radiation in space?
They're working on it, developing shielding materials for spacecraft and habitats.
Shielding material? Okay, so like special metals or something.
Yeah, things like that. And also water.
Wait, water? Like the stuff we drink?
Yep, plain old H2O.
How does that protect you from radiation?
It's dense.
Yeah.
And it's rich in hydrogen atoms, which can absorb and deflect some of the radiation.
Oh, wow. So like a wall of water could act as a shield.
Kind of like that, yeah. That's one of the things they're looking at.
It's amazing how they come up with these solutions using everyday materials in new ways.
Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
That's for sure. So even with all these precautions, living on Mars is still going to be incredibly tough, isn't it?
It will, yeah. That's not going to be a walk in the park.
No, definitely not. But I mean, there's also the potential for like terraforming, right?
You know, terraforming, the ultimate Mars makeover.
Yeah, like turning it into a more Earth-like planet.
It's a fascinating concept, one that's been around for a long time.
I know, I've seen it in so many sci-fi movies.
Right, but the reality is much more complex.
Yeah. I mean, is it even possible to like transform a whole planet?
It's a huge undertaking, to say the least.
But let's say we could, how would we even start?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is Mars's atmosphere. It's too thin, and it's mostly CO2.
Right. So we'd need to thicken it up and add more oxygen.
Exactly. And that's where the idea of releasing greenhouse gases comes in.
Greenhouse gases, isn't that what's causing global warming here on Earth?
It is, but on Mars, it could actually be a good thing.
Wait, really? How so?
Because Mars is so cold, right? So by adding greenhouse gases to its atmosphere,
You could trap more heat from the sun.
exactly, warm up the planet, maybe even melt some of the polar ice caps.
Oh, wow. So we'd be like intentionally causing global warming on Mars?
In a controlled way, yeah, to try to make it more habitable.
But where would we even get all those greenhouse gases?
There are a few ideas, like vaporizing the frozen CO2 at the poles.
Okay, so using what's already there.
Yeah. Or maybe importing greenhouse gases from other celestial bodies, like comets.
Comets, like dragging them to
It
Mars?
sounds crazy, I know, but it's one possibility they're looking at.
So we thicken the atmosphere, warm up the planet. What's next?
Water, gotta have water.
Right, because Mars is basically a desert right now.
Yeah, very dry, but there's evidence of water ice beneath the surface.
So we could, like, melt it.
Potentially, yeah. Or maybe redirect water-rich asteroids to impact Mars.
Asteroids, like, crash them into Mars?
It sounds dramatic, I know, but it could be a way to deliver a lot of water quickly.
Wow, this is all so mind-boggling, the scale of it all.
It is. Terraforming a planet is a huge undertaking.
And how long would it even take to terraform Mars? Like, could we see it in our lifetime?
Probably not. Most estimates say it would take centuries, if not millennia.
Centuries. Wow, so this is like a long-term project for generations to come.
Exactly. It's not something that's going to happen overnight.
It's amazing to think about transforming a whole planet over hundreds of years.
It really is. It's a testament to human ambition, to our desire to push the boundaries.
But even if we never fully terraform Mars, the research and technology we develop along the way could still be beneficial, right?
Oh, absolutely. The things we learned about energy production, material science, all that stuff could have applications here on Earth, too.
So it's not just about Mars, it's about advancing our knowledge and capabilities as a species.
Exactly. It's about pushing the limits of what's possible.
I like that, pushing the limit. So we've covered a lot of ground here, but I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the human element.
The psychological side of things, yeah.
Exactly, because we talked about the physical challenges, but the mental and emotional aspects are huge too.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what we'll delve into next.
Okay, sounds good. I'm ready to dive into the human psyche.
Let's do it. It's going to be fascinating.
For me, it's that one-way ticket idea, knowing you might never come back to Earth.
Yeah, that's a big one. Leaving everything behind.
Your family, your friends, your whole life.
And knowing that even communication will be tough, those messages back and forth, they'll take time.
Yeah, like a 20-minute delay each way.
Imagine trying to have a conversation like that.
It'd be weird for sure. And then there's the whole like building a new life thing.
Creating a new society, a new culture from scratch.
On a completely different planet.
With its own unique challenges, its own rhythm. It's fascinating to think about.
Yeah, like will Martian culture be totally different from Earth culture?
Or will they try to, like, recreate Earth traditions, holidays, all that stuff?
It makes you wonder how they'll adapt, how they'll find that sense of belonging.
Community is going to be crucial. That shared purpose, that sense of working together towards a common goal.
Because they're all in it together, right? Out there on the frontier.
Exactly. Pioneers building a new world.
And speaking of new worlds, what about governance? Like, who's going to be in charge on Mars?
Yeah, the question of leadership, SpaceX, they're big on self-determination for Martian colonists.
Right. We talked about that earlier, making their own laws, independent of Earth.
It's a bold idea, but it does raise some questions.
Yeah, like what if things go wrong? What if there are disagreements, conflicts?
Without a clear legal framework, things could get messy.
Yeah, and what about the role of companies like SpaceX? I mean, they're the ones funding it all.
Right, so will they try to exert control? Will it be like a company town, but on Mars?
That's kind of scary, like a Martian version of the Wild West.
We have to learn from history, from the mistakes of colonialism on Earth.
Yeah, we don't want to repeat those patterns on another planet.
It's about finding that balance, individual freedom, but also collective responsibility.
Creating a society that's fair, equitable, sustainable.
And that takes careful planning, thoughtful consideration, a lot of open discussion.
We can't just wing it, right? This is a whole new planet we're talking about.
Exactly. It's not just about the technical challenges, it's about the ethical ones too.
It's about who we are as a species, what values we want to carry with us into the cosmos.
And that's a conversation that needs to involve everyone, not just scientists and engineers.
Yeah, policymakers, ethicists, everyday people, we all have a stake in this.
It's about shaping the future of humanity, not just on Mars, but beyond.
Wow, when you put it like that, it's pretty profound.
It is. It's a big responsibility and an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, both exciting and kind of daunting at the same time.
I think that's a good way to put it. Mars colonization, it's a journey into the unknown, full of challenges and possibilities.
And it's a journey we're all taking together, in a way.
Even if we never set foot on Mars ourselves, the ideas we're grappling with, the technologies we're developing, they're shaping the future.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all this?
I think it's that Mars colonization. It's not just a science fiction fantasy anymore. It's becoming a real possibility.
Yeah, and it's not just about the technology. It's about us, about humanity.
About the choices we make, the values we uphold, the future we create.
It's a big conversation, a complex one, and it's one that's worth having.
Absolutely. So keep learning, keep asking questions, keep looking up at the stars.
And who knows, maybe one day some of us will be looking up at those stars from the surface of Mars.
Stranger things have happened.
That's for sure. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been an incredible journey.
My pleasure. Always a blast talking about space.
Until next time, keep exploring.